Okay, everyone. Good evening. Is everybody there? Good evening. My name is Ian Fradgley. I'm Chairman of the Town Council Planning Consultative Committee, and I welcome you to this meeting. I have to tell you, councillors, that we have deferred two. Okay, everyone. Good evening. Oh, can you all hear me? We have deferred two applications from additional chairman's actions. One is the TA is back for a hat trick, and the other one is the application for development on the KES playing field. Please could I remind you to keep muted until invited to speak by having raised your virtual hand. And as usual, when we are going to vote, we should be using the yes and no buttons. So I will now declare this meeting open. Item number 1, apologies for absence. Do I have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest on items on the agenda, including contact with or communication from applicants, objectors, supporters or agents, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Do I have any declarations? Just wave your hand. Councillor Fradgley? Unmute yourself.
Yeah. I've had extensive consultation over the Territorial Army site.
Thank you. Councillor, Mr. Mayor? Do you unmute yourself, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Sorry, should have worked. Yes, I started on a Zoom meeting with the planners about the Territorial Army Broad Street development last week, but I've also got, as a trustee of the town trust, the licence application for 13 Rother Street. That's one of our properties, so interested in that one.
Right, thank you. Councillor Cleeve.
Yes, then as a trustee of Town Trust, I also have the same declaration.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'd like to declare that I attended a meeting with the developers on the Territorial Army application, along with the ward councillors and the SDC planning officer. Okay. Item 3, to receive written requests for dispensation for disclosable pecuniary.
Excuse me, Chair. Councillor Curtis got his hand up.
Oh, has he? Where is he?
Here and blue. Thank you, Chair. First, my apologies for being late on the scene. I lost the link. But also I have attended various meetings with residents and others over the Territorial Army development.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Right, where was I? Item 3, to receive written requests for dispensation. There are none. Item 4, to grant any requests for dispensation. There are none. Item 5, public participation of non-agenda items on matters under which the council has control of or is a consultative body. I believe that everybody present is here for the specific application, so we have no public participation. Item 6, pre-planning applications. There are none. Item 7, to approve the draft open minutes for the Planning Consultative Committee meeting on the 2nd of June. Do I have your agreement? Could you raise your hand in agreement? Sorry, no, it's yes in agreement. Are you counting that, Joe?
Yeah.
Have you got it?
Yes. Yes, I think, yes, I have, yes.
Okay, thank you. Item 8 is missing from the agenda. It's because last month we had an extra item to discuss, so and Lisa forgot to do some renumbering. So we go to item 9.1, list of planning applications deferred from the Chairman's actions. From the 17th of June, there were none, and from the additional Chairman's actions, we have 2. And I'd like to start with the first one, which is the TA Centre in New Broad Street. And I'd like to hand over to Neil to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. As the Chair's already mentioned, this is the 3rd time that it's been before the Planning Committee. The last time it was before the committee was at the last committee, which I think was at the beginning of the month. I have that I can show you the comments that you made on the first and second scheme, if you need to remind yourself, but hopefully it's still fairly fresh in your memory. So just to recap, this is the latest site layout plan. I don't think the site needs any introduction. The main issue for you this evening is to discuss some amendments to the scheme. Principally, the design has changed. I will just recap on what you said on the last meeting, because you mentioned the design itself, and you submitted a holding objection. You'd considered the various amendments that were before you last time. In particular, Seven Meadows construction traffic was welcomed. Temporary fencing to New Broad Street during the construction was also welcomed. The revised housing mix you were happy with, being in line with the neighbour plan. Footpath link to Seven Meadows Road, you requested be restricted to access for residents for the development and possibly new Broad Street residents. I can update you that there's confirmation in this latest submission that it will be a keypad coded gate, so not an access for anybody who's privy to the code. Obviously is a matter for another day, but it won't be a thoroughfare for the general public, assuming the gate is shut properly. In terms of the design, the first scheme came forward as a more traditional red brick tiled construction, traditional windows, sash windows, etc. And the scheme that you saw last time was a move towards a more modern design, utilising powder-coated aluminium cladding. And you were disappointed with that change, and you felt that it was at odds with the local vernacular and was unacceptable. So just to recap, that is the design that was originally proposed. So that's the traditional design, red brick, sash windows, plain tiles, chimney details, etc. This was the design that you raised concerns with, and in particular, the use of the powder-coated cladding on the building itself, both the projecting gables and indeed on the main facade as well. So the applicants have gone away and looked at that and come up with a slightly revised scheme, and I'll show you this now. And that's the current scheme that's before you. So slightly less powder-coated aluminium and more red brick, in particular on the projecting gables there. So if I just flick between the two, hopefully you can see the difference. So this again is the scheme you objected to. And that's the scheme that's now before you. So the main issue for this application is essentially whether or not this particular design now overcomes your previous concerns. The applicant has also mentioned that the use of the powder-coated aluminium has some context in terms of the former use of the site. And I know there's a speaker that's going to address you shortly, so I shan't steal her thunder. But essentially, the main issue before you now is one of design, which of course is subjective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Neil, would you mind showing us, I believe on the website, there is an example of how they've worked this in the past. Could you show us that one?
Could you be a bit more specific as to where that is on the website?
I think it's an example of how this aluminium cladding has been put on on things they've done in the past.
Might take a moment to find that, because I have to say I haven't spotted that.
Okay.
There's a large scale drawing on, bear with me 1 second. So the bottom here, let me zoom in, gives you a better idea in terms of that particular house type, in terms of how it's going to be constructed. So you've got the brick area here with a slight frame, aluminium frame around the windows and an aluminium facade here. But I shall hunt that down hopefully, and perhaps Liz might be able to point me in the right direction when she addresses the committee if I haven't found it.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, do you have any points of clarification from Neil's presentation? Oh. Sorry, there's something happened to I can't see the list of, I've only got Jill Cleave in the participants.
Councillor Curtis.
Councillor Curtis. Yeah, that's better.
Thank you. I hope this is a point for clarification, Chair. Neil, you mentioned the revised housing mix does meet the neighbourhood development plan. Can you just remind us what the revised housing mix on the site is now proposed to be, please?
Yes, certainly. There is effectively 10% one beds, which is the NDP requirement. 30% two beds. The neighbourhood plan requires 35%. There's 40% three beds, and that is the requirement of the neighbourhood plan. And in terms of 4+ beds, the proposal is for 20%. The neighbourhood plan is 15%. But as I explained at the last committee meeting, because we're only dealing with 9 units, it's very difficult to make sure that it's an absolute compliance with those percentages. So in other words, if you took half of one of those units and changed it from a 2-bed to from a 4-bed to a 2-bed, you'd meet the policy. And obviously you can't change the mix of half a unit in effect. So I think
perhaps I have an outdated version of the neighbourhood development plan, or perhaps I'm misinterpreting it, but according to that, it says that 1 bedroom should be 15 to 20%.
Right, so this is policy H7, market housing, and technically this applies to developments or 10 units or more. So in essence, the obligation to comply with those percentages is not necessarily there. But the version that I have in terms of the, well, let's have a look. I can bring it up on the screen, bear with me. Oh,
I see, yeah. So it's slightly, perhaps is my lack of experience, because page 35, yes, it does say 10% 1 bedroom. I was looking at page 31 where it says 15 to 20%, but I'm sure you're correct.
That's the policy in the adopted neighbourhood plan. So 10% 1 beds, 2%, 35% 2 beds, 40% 3 beds.
Yeah.
Councillor Curtis, are you looking at the core strategy market housing policy? Because they do have bands in the core strategy, but in the neighbourhood plan, you went away from the bands and you had a specific policy in the plan itself. So it might be that you're confusing it with the core strategy housing mix policy as opposed to the neighbourhood plan housing mix policy.
I think you're right. Thank you for that clarification, Neil.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Fradgley. Demute yourself.
Yeah. May I just ask if there is any update on the sewerage proposals?
If you mean,
Or I can ask the developer if that's more relevant, if that's easier.
well, but just bear with me 1 second. I presume you mean from the statutory consultee.
Yeah.
There's been nothing since the last time you considered this application. But as I said, I think when this was raised before, it's extremely unusual for the statutory undertaker, which would be Severn Trent Water, to object to an application of this nature, simply because they're a business and new dwellings means new.
I just thought there had been an update, but that's fine. That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other further points of clarification? No? Okay, thank you. We will now go to our speakers, and the first speaker we have, we take, for those who knew, we take the speakers in a particular order. Objectors first, supporters second, applicants third, and ward members last, or fourth. So for this, I would like to ask Sam McNaught-Barrow if she would like to unmute herself. And you know the rule, what we do. It's 3 minutes. Tell us when you want to start, and you'll get a plus 30 seconds from the end.
Thank you.
You want to start now?
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just got 2 points to raise. First of all, the cycle pathway pedestrian access. There are deep concerns amongst many people who live on New Broad Street about how it's going to be maintained and the security of it. And none of these points have actually been answered, and many residents think it should be scrapped altogether. And secondly, the design. Yeah, there have been some improvements, but most residents feel that this hybrid solution doesn't meet the quality of design standards that are achievable and which are appropriate for this part of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, would you like to ask Mrs. McNaught-Barrow any questions? No? Right, thank you. Thank you for Mrs. McNaught-Barrow for coming to give us your thoughts. I'd like to now call upon Liz Nicholson to speak in favour of the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Early on, I mean, we recognise that this site is very important to local residents and to the town council, and we hope that we've tried to work with the local community in preparing the proposals. When the last revised proposals came to your meeting on the 2nd of June, as Neil said to you, your only outstanding concern was design issues. I appreciate local residents have also raised some other concerns. We're really grateful to the town council for being willing to have an informal discussion with us on the design issues, with the planning officer present as well. And obviously, as a result, we've now submitted these revisions to you. As well as reducing the aluminium cladding to expose more of the brickwork, we have also reduced the size of those windows on the central windows on the apartment building as well, and provided the additional details about the cladding. The example in Kenilworth is on the website, so I can point Neil in that direction if you want to look at it later. In terms of the drainage, there were comments made by the lead local flood authority on the 4th of June, which raised some concerns, but since then our consultant's been working with them. The email exchange shows that that's been resolved. What we're waiting for is the formal response from the LFA to come through that can go on the website to demonstrate that we have resolved all those matters. In terms of the pedestrian link, it will be managed by a management company. There has to be a management company for the visitor parking spaces and some of the shared areas. So it would be managed by them. We feel it's a good idea in terms of connectivity. I think the planning officer felt it was a good idea in connectivity. But if it's really a sticking point, that could be dropped from the proposals even at this stage, if that was a sticking point to gaining the town council support for this scheme. In terms of construction phase, I know there was also some concerns raised last time about the construction phase. Stratford District Council, as you know, will put a condition on requiring full details of a construction management plan to come in and be approved by the District Council. But at this stage, we can confirm the site will be secured from New Broad Street. It'll be fully fenced off at that site for 3 reasons. One, for security, obviously, for the site. Secondly, because county highways don't want that to be used during the construction stage. And thirdly, to protect
30 seconds.
So obviously we don't want to be causing more disruption than necessary. It doesn't help the development to get on. So I hope you'll agree that we've made changes that you were looking for, and these final revisions could now be supported and given planning permission. Thank you.
Oh, that's the one I wanted you to see. That's an example of the aluminium. Thank you, Neil. Okay, has anyone got any questions they wish to put to Liz? Councillor Cleave?
Yeah, and apologies if this has been covered previously. Just wondering why it was changed from the very initial planning application with just the full brickwork. Obviously, that was an issue we looked at the time, and obviously it's changed quite a bit in that time. So just wondering what the thought process behind that was.
It was largely due to the initial feedback from the planning officer, who raised a number of concerns about design and layout. And so in making other changes, for example, turning semi-detached houses into terraces, getting rid of front gardens to get rid of that suburban feel that concerned the planning officer, it was part of a package of, well, in redesigning the scheme, we want them to have a modern feel, and that introduced the cladding, which we knew had worked well on another scheme. So it's part of a package of changes that we made.
Okay, Councillor Cleave? Yes, thank you. Councillor Curtis?
Yes, it's sort of, I must admit, I'm baffled by this aluminium cladding. It may have worked well on another scheme, but that other scheme was in a different context. And personally, I honestly, in a different context, I wouldn't object at all. I think the buildings look very stylish, but I fail to see what it actually adds in the context of this street scene here. It's probably, and I'm sure in Kenilworth, in a different, as I say, in a different context, it's fine. But in this context, I don't see that it adds anything, and I just wonder why. What's the rationale behind it?
No, you're right. You shouldn't just cut and paste something from another site and plonk it on another site. And I'm sorry if I gave that impression. One of the reasons for the cladding, as you can see, Neil's helpfully put those elevations back up, was to reduce the impact of the garage doors in the street scene, because one of the comments that came back to us was that garages weren't really a part of frontages that you see in Old Town. Now, there are a few garages through Old Town, actually, but we took on board the feedback that they don't form a strong feature in a lot of the street scenes. By putting that cladding on, as you can see, your eye is not drawn to garage doors. It also, with the cladding there and reducing just a little bit that roof height, you narrow the width of the plots, you narrow the visual perception of the buildings. And again, that was feedback that we'd had, that these needed to look more like narrow fronted, terraced properties that would be more in keeping with Old Town. So there was a purpose to using it on this site rather than just a cut and paste from Kenilworth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could you clear down the screen, Neil? Thank you. You're going to switch your hand off now, Councillor Curtis. Thank you. There's no one else want to ask Liz a question. So I think we'll have to proceed to the debate. Do I have anyone who wants to kick the debate off? Councillor Cleave.
No, nothing really to it. I mean, I can understand what Liz was just saying about drawing your eye to it, but I'm still not 100% convinced it's fitting for Old Town. But I could see as soon as you said that about looking at it from drawing your eye away from the garage, but it's still not 100% convinced on that.
Next, please. Can I have somebody else who will join the debate? Otherwise, I'll just go around the room. Councillor Lee?
Hi there. Yeah, obviously I missed half the meeting last time, but it's good to get the context again for the design. Again, I think it echoes what Councillor Curtis was really saying, my view on the matter. From a design perspective, I live in Old Town. I'm used to there being red brick houses around. And for me, the context, the setting of this more modern design isn't really justified. And I think I don't understand why there has to be a modern feel to this. It just does not make sense to me. And I'd be happy with a red brick in the kind of form that it is. But I think the aluminium cladding just doesn't add anything to me. There's no clear reason for it. And I could see it in other parts of the town, but I don't see it in Old Town.
Okay. Councillor Taylor?
I would agree with everything Toby's just said, and to me, I don't think there's been enough done with regards to the previous comments that we made. It's only a marginal movement on virtually what we said we didn't like in the first place. So I don't think it fits to Old Town. Thank
you. I will call upon Councillor Fradgley and the Mayor last, since it's in their ward. Who have we got? Councillor Dowling?
Yeah, not much to add, Chair, really. I thoroughly agree with everything that's been said so far. I really don't like the aluminium cladding. I think perfectly good red brick houses and with a painted garage door are going to be absolutely perfect rather than this aluminium. I know it's a completely different type of aluminium cladding than we had in the Grenfell Tower, but people's minds are still drawn to that. So I would definitely ask them to change the design. So I would be against this application.
Thank you, Councillor Dowling. Mr. Mayor?
It's interesting because from the previous planning committee meeting, I wasn't happy with the amount of cladding that was there, and I still think that's the right decision. But having sat in with the prior meeting with the planning officer and the applicant, I actually was generally persuaded that masking the impact of the garage doors was a worthwhile objective, and that reducing the amount of cladding was probably an acceptable compromise. It's a very difficult one because it's very subjective on design, but my personal view is I wouldn't make a strong objection. It's just I think it's an acceptable compromise, would be my view, but we go with the majority of the committee, obviously.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Fradgley?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who came together to actually have that extended meeting where a lot was discussed, as the Mayor has just said. I am actually really delighted at the layout. I think the layout is a vast improvement. It actually does fit into that part of Old Town with the terraced housing. I also like the kind of contemporary riff on Victorian vernacular that we have in that street with the shape of the windows and the chimneys and the layout of it. I am actually disappointed that not more of the cladding has actually gone, although I do take what the Mayor said, that there is perhaps a compromise to be looked at. I was slightly disappointed that we did discuss stucco, but stucco was it was decided against the meeting that wasn't appropriate. Although I did see later that there is a small amount of stucco on the back elevation, and I think that could have been a longer discussion at that point. I think it's an extremely difficult one now, because going forward, a lot of discussion has been taking place, and I think we'll have to see what the vote says. I'm very conflicted over it, this actually. I think the design, the actual form is good. I think the way the layout is good. I'm very pleased that the windows on the large building were altered to portrait from landscape, but I'm still a bit stuck on the amount of aluminium that we have.
Thank you, Councillor Fradgley. Do I have a proposal? You've gone very quiet. We need to respond to this. Can I have somebody to respond? Councillor Jackson. Mr. Mayor.
Well, to move things forward, I will propose that we accept the application as it stands, with the reduced amount of cladding on the walls.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second to see how it goes in the vote.
Thank you. Right, we've got a proposal and we've got a seconder. Please, could you all wave your yes flags or no flags or whatever? What's the answer, Joe?
I've got 5 no and 2 yes.
Right, thank you. Do I have a counter proposal? Councillor Dowling.
I'd like to propose that we object to this proposal on the grounds that we don't think that the aluminium cladding is fitting for this location.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Sorry, Chair, may I say something? Can I make an alteration? I would actually say another holding objection to see if there's one more conversation that could be had, because this has actually come backwards and forwards. Let's see if you could have one more conversation to see if you could actually reduce the amount of aluminium cladding one more time before there is an outright objection.
I'm quite happy to alter my proposal, Chair, then to a holding objection until further discussions take place with the.
I don't know whether we've got any more time. I'm not quite sure when we have to have submitted our. Could you tell us, Neil?
Gone to the pub.
Are you there, Neil?
I'm here. I'm just shuffling papers, trying to find the curveball question you've aimed at me. Comments are due by the 26th of June, which is 3 days' time, but the application's already been extended in terms of the determination period. So if the committee were mindful to continue to raise these issues and just put it's a holding objection, it's down to the planning officer as to whether or not to proceed with the design and take it to planning committee with your objection on the file, or whether or not they would use that as further mechanism to discuss the design with the applicant. That's entirely the planning officer's obviously prerogative, but you need to comment this evening either way.
Well, I've had a proposal from Councillor Dowling. I've had another counter proposal from Councillor Fradgley. I've had Councillor Dowling withdraw his proposal in favour of Councillor Fradgley's proposal. Do I have anybody who will second Councillor Fradgley? Councillor Cleave?
Yes, I'd like to second the amended proposal by Councillor Fradgley.
Thank you. Right. Can I take a vote on that then, please?
Chairman, I have 7 yeses.
Right. Oh, yes. Okay. So that's what we're going to say then. Would you like to record that, Neil? Ah.
One step ahead of you, Chair.
Yes.
So I'll read that for those of you who are perhaps watching this on a small screen. Draft comments I've written are as follows. The Town Council has considered the proposed minor changes to the design. Unfortunately, these changes do not overcome the objections previously raised by the Town Council. The materials should be brick and tile only. The Town Council therefore submits another holding objection and would request further amendments are made.
Right. Could I have your approval for that, please? If you'd like to go yes or no. What's the score, Joe?
Yes, sorry, Chairman. Yes,
Yeah.
everyone has voted yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Right. Is everybody mute? Curtis, could you mute yourself, please? Thank you. Right. We'll go on to the next item now, which is to do with the King Edward's playing field on Manor Road. I would like to call upon Neil to do a presentation. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Right, okay, so this is a detailed planning application for the erection of 6 detached dwellings and the creation of 2 new access points off of Manor Road. The application site is outlined in red on the plan before you. You're probably all familiar with where the application site is, but obviously it's within the town boundary. It's not within a conservation area, but the sports pavilion is a grade 2 listed building. So this site is arguably within the setting of that listed building. So in terms of the site plan, here are the 6 detached dwellings. Plot 1 at the top going down to plot 2 at the bottom. The points of access are first one in here, serving the first 3 plots, and the second access point is in here, serving the southernmost 3 plots. And the grey area here is just the driveway and access and parking facilities. 2 spaces per dwelling proposed for the parking, with bin and recycling and cycle storage within the curtilage. This plan also shows some of the trees which are affecting the application site. There is a group tree preservation order. I'll come to the trees in a moment, but you can see that they are along the frontage of the site. In terms of street scene, these are some computer generated images showing the context of the street. There are 2 different house types proposed, house type A and house type B, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 house type A's and 2 house type B's. So this is house type A. You can see the elevation down the bottom. So there you go. There's all 4 elevations. So the north elevation is effectively the front elevation. That's what you'll see from the street scene. And the south elevation underneath it is the rear, and they are the side elevations and floor plans. All of the units are 4-bedroomed properties. So in terms of mix, they're all 4 beds, but obviously the housing mix policy doesn't kick in until you get to 10 dwellings. Equally, all 6 units are market homes, no affordable homes on site, and that's because it falls under the threshold for affordable homes. And this is the other house type, type B, of which there are 2 of these. So again, they are the 4 elevations. Front elevation is the top left, beneath it is the bottom. So you can see it is more of a contemporary design with glazed gables, plain tiled roofs, aluminium powder coated windows, and brick, presumably a red brick to match the local red brick within the town. So in terms of the trees, there's 2 plans I'm about to show you. This is the first one. This is the northern part of the site. The proposal specifically removes 5 of the TPO trees. There is also another tree that's on the northern boundary of the site. It's actually in the adjoining, on the adjoining land. And you can see that shown here. This is T17. I'm not an expert, but I would be very surprised if that tree survives incursion into the root protection zone from the foundations of that property. If that accurately depicts the canopy and the spread of the tree, as it should do, then obviously there is a significant issue going forward. The tree is a living species, it's growing, and obviously that close and overlapping one of the properties is only going to cause issues going forward in the future in terms of the occupiers of the property putting pressure on the planning authority to have it removed because of damage to the property itself. Appreciate that there's a right to perhaps cut back some of the limbs of those trees, subject to gaining consent for that, of course, because it is a tree with a preservation order on it. And that's the southern part of the trees. There's just 1 tree down here to be removed to make way for the access, and 4 trees up here. And as I say, that's at the moment staying, but I have doubts as to whether or not that would actually be able to remain. So some further background to you. The application site you're looking at is over here. This proposal, this plan in front of you relates to a permission that was granted originally, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, in respect of some sports pitches, improvements to the pavilion, and an all-weather football, well, multi-use pitch, football and other sports down here. That was consented. I think you actually responded with no reps, so you didn't have any issues with that, and obviously why would you? The case that's now being put forward for the 6 dwellings is one of effectively enabling development. What that basically means is that the applicant is claiming that in order to provide these sports pitches, there needs to be some development to help pay for it, in effect. So one of the key issues for you is, firstly, is there a secure mechanism in place to ensure that the finance gain from the 6 dwellings is actually ring-fenced and used to provide these facilities? And are the disbenefits of the houses, if you decide there are any, outweighed by the benefits of providing the sports and recreation facilities? And the applicant has put forward, I should say, that's, there we go, that's a plan which shows it in a bit more context. So there's the 6 houses. There is, as a result of these 6 houses, a requirement to make some minor alterations to that approved scheme. In essence, it's shuffling the pitches in that direction. So this plan effectively shows the greater context, if you like, in terms of where the pitches are and where the houses are. Now, the applicant has submitted heads of terms for a draft legal agreement which seeks to secure effectively the implementation of the sports pitches within 2 years of the grant of planning permission for the houses. That's the first thing, if I've read that correctly, and Mr. Frampton can correct me if I am wrong. And the second point is that the community club use agreement, which effectively allows the pitches to be used by not the general public, as I understand it, of the town, but the various sports clubs within the town to use these facilities when the school is not using them themselves. And there's also one other suggested heads of term, which is an exclusion zone, I suppose, for want of a better word, in terms of development happening along the frontage of this part of the site. And you will probably recall, well, maybe you won't recall because it was some time ago now, best part of, I think, about 9 years ago, planning permission was sought for an extra care facility in this location here. It was an X-shaped building from memory, just in this location here, which oddly enough had an access from the road here rather than through the trees and not directly onto Manor Road. But the applicants are submitting that they would not put any. It's basically a legal covenant. They wouldn't put any, couldn't get any permission on that part of the site. So in terms of the main issues for you to consider, firstly, it's obviously the loss of part of an area of open space and playing field at the moment. The fact that it doesn't have public access, in my view, is not determinative of that particular aspect. Clearly, there is a significant issue in terms of impact on the trees, the loss of those trees which have preservation orders on them. In terms of the design, obviously that's another issue. As we've just been through with the TA Centre, that's obviously a very subjective issue for you, but happy to hear the debate on that. In terms of the mix, obviously, as I've described, nothing we can really do about that. They are all 4 beds, but the policy for housing mix doesn't kick in until you get to 10 units. So I don't think there is anything you can raise there with any policy foundation in terms of getting a more mixed 1, 2, 3, 4 beds, etc. on the site. The loss of outlook from properties on Manor Road opposite is not a material planning consideration. So the fact that they have a view at the moment or an outlook at the moment is not something that you can obviously oppose. In terms of the visual amenity and the effect on the character and the appearance of the street scene, yes, that clearly is a material planning consideration. The planning statement suggests there will be a low level impact and a modest change to the street scene, and I have to say I would disagree with that. There is clearly a change, it's quite a significant change. Whether or not that change represents a harm is obviously another matter. Not all change should be automatically harmful, but that again is a subjective matter for you to consider. So I think they are the main issues, and happy to take any questions.
Right, can I see anybody?
Councillor Cleeve.
Councillor Cleeve.
Thank you. Just wondering, with the TPOs, obviously if they do end up having planning permission removing the trees, I didn't see on the diagram, I wasn't 100% sure, are they replacing them somewhere else? Are the trees being replanted?
There's obviously, if permission is granted, there'll be a full detailed landscape scheme required, which will give you the intricate detail. But if you look at the site plan here, there are trees indicatively shown along the rear boundary of the site. I would suggest it's probably not appropriate or possible to replace trees within or along the site frontage because there's probably insufficient room effectively. But there's certainly scope towards the rear of the properties to put some robust tree planting. That's obviously a very sensitive boundary anyway, being open to the playing field. So it's finding a balance between a secure means of enclosure for the gardens, but also an appropriate means of enclosure from a visual amenity perspective, particularly with the setting of the listed pavilion, and obviously the need for that to be, well, hopefully a green boundary, whether that's some kind of a fence with a hedge or trees, is yet to be determined.
Okay. Right, Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chairman. Neil, I wonder if you can steer us in the direction. I've been looking, but unsuccessfully, to try and find either in the neighbourhood development plan or the core strategy a policy on playing fields that would inform our discussion or future discussion on this. I wonder, can you point us in that direction, please?
I can. In terms of the core strategy, it's CS25, which is entitled Healthy Communities. It's quite a long policy, but right at the end, it says, and I'll just read this out because I haven't got it on screen, but development proposals that would result in the loss of public or private open space, including allotments, without suitable replacement being made, will be resisted unless, and there's two provisos, it can be demonstrated that there is an absence of need or it is surplus to requirements, and it does not make a valuable contribution to the amenity and character of the area. So I think the issue you've got there is that it certainly would result in the loss of private open space. I don't think that is a disputable fact. It's just whether or not the loss of that can be mitigated in some other way. And I suspect, looking at the submission, the enabling development is the mitigation. In effect, what the applicant is suggesting is that the loss of this part of the playing field, and bearing in mind that it's still quite a substantial area retained, so the loss of a small portion, if you can describe it as that, would be mitigated by the enhancement on the rest of the playing fields with the pitches and the facilities and what have you. So it's again that classic planning balance or classic planning dilemma as to is the harm outweighed by the benefits effectively. So that's what's before you. There is a policy in the neighbourhood plan also that deals with open spaces. It's not quite as direct as the core strategy, but it's CLW3. I just find that myself. So this is a policy that is entitled Protecting and Enhancing Existing Open Spaces. The policy makes a statement at the beginning, which I'll just read it. It is important to protect and enhance existing open spaces in order to ensure a suitable quantum and quality of recreational and amenity space is available for the neighbourhood plan. So a presumption there in terms of protect and enhance. The policy then goes on to identify a number of local green spaces and other open spaces for which this is not one of those. So this isn't a designated local green space in the neighbourhood plan or a designated open space, but that I believe this policy still captures with that opening sentence the need to protect and enhance existing open spaces within the town. So those are the two policies that deal with loss of or effect on open space and playing fields.
That's very helpful, Neil. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other points of clarification? Councillor Cleave?
Yeah, sorry, I meant to ask earlier. Neil, I don't know if you could go back to the first one that showed the street view of it with the colour. I was just wondering, because obviously it's essentially new access, new roads. Yeah, the back one, the one that just came up. Yeah, that one. What about things, you mentioned that there are bin storages. What about access for the bins though? Because I know that road in itself does get very busy. I drive down that way quite a lot myself. Have we looked at can the bin lorries essentially get in there? Is that the plan, or will they be picking up on the street? Has that been looked at?
Yeah, almost certainly this is not a scheme where refuse vehicles will enter. These will be private driveways. It will be a curbside collection like the other properties along Manor Road. The bikes and the bins are indicated to be stored adjacent to the parking areas. I think there was a plan of the bin and bike store, which I can find and bring up for you. But essentially, it's a I believe it's a curbside collection like all the other properties in Manor Road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Just a quick one, hopefully, on just on any environmental mitigation. Well, I suppose environmental enhancement from an energy use point of view. Is there any renewable schemes or anything like that proposed for the development?
I'll be honest and say I didn't actually see anything specifically about that, but I'll have another flick through the planning statement to see if there is anything. And Mr. Frampton's here, and I was obviously extremely familiar with the scheme, so may be able to answer that one. So sorry to deflect, but I didn't see any specific proposals for energy efficiency. I couldn't see any solar panels on the roof plans, for example, or anything else like that. And I suspect that would probably be the only suitable renewable energy scheme that you could put on there, because the rear gardens obviously are not particularly large. I will just add that they are all in accordance with the supplementary planning document in terms of minimum garden sizes as well. I did measure that because I noticed somebody made a comment on that. And a 4-bedroom property requires a rear garden of or an amenity space of 62 square meters. And I measured the smallest one and it does exceed that. Not by a huge amount. I think it was 70 odd square meters, but it complies with policy in terms of garden sizes. But if you're doing sort of ground source heat pumps and things like that, you need quite a large area for that sort of kit, if you like. So
Okay, anyone else? Could I just add there that the house where you see number 34 on the plan, which then, and there's a plot of land which goes up to the first house on this, that land in between 34 and the first house already has a planning permission, which we saw probably about a year ago now, and they do have planning for that. And I take it T17 is in the garden of this new house.
that's correct, Chairman, and apologies, I should have pointed that out. The Chairman's absolutely correct, and I think a reserve matters application's now been granted for the plot. So that's effectively in this location here. It's quite a long, narrow building from memory, but yes, there is a consent in here.
Where you see the black line that Neil has scattered over, that is actually a garage at the moment. That's a garage of the land for number 34. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Cleeve?
Yeah, just on that other planning permission, was that a big extension, or what was planning permission for that one on number 34?
It's a brand new house.
Oh, it's a brand new, the whole new house. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I can't see anybody else. No. Okay, so thank you. We'll go to our first speaker, which is an objector, and it's Mr. Neil. We have Mr. Neil somewhere. I got him. Right, David. You'll get 3 minutes. You'll be timed by Jo, and she'll give you a 30-second warning when you're near the end. So, would you like to start?
Yes. However laudable the ambitions of KES to improve the sports field at Manor Road, it cannot be to the detriment of the green space policy in the area. Section 1.5 of the Listed Building and Conservation Act 1990 states, The curtilage of a building, i.e. the principal building, is in general terms an area of land and other buildings that are around and associated with that principal building. This statement is confirmed in Historic England's listed buildings curtilage consultation, draft 27th of January 2017. English Heritage, Historic England further state that they remain concerned by the potential damage by development, contrary to the established planning policy, put forward as a way of benefiting significant places, but destroy more than they save. The policy that they use to determine acceptability include the proviso that it will not harm heritage value or place of setting. The National Policy Planning Framework, Policy CLW1, states outdoor community facilities, including playing fields, sports facilities, and other recreational land, will be protected against loss of encroachment. The core strategy states development should protect and enhance our natural built and historic environment. In assessment of the core strategy, land parcels for future usage on the edge of Stratford, Manor Road is not on its list for consideration. The core strategy acknowledges that quality of life should aim for a high quality, multifunctional green infrastructure network that is key to the quality of life for residents. The core strategy acknowledges that the potential biodiversity loss and habitat fragmentation as a result of growth pressures and development, and that there is a need for increased support and understanding of the role of green infrastructure and the preservation of natural heritage assets, plus high environmental values. The Stratford-upon-Avon design statement says, retain as much green space as possible. Under the Neighbourhood Plan and Localism Act, local communities can identify for special protection green areas of particular importance by designating land as land of local green space. Local communities will be able to rule out new development other than in very special circumstances. Manor Road is within the green space necklace, designated as green space.
30 seconds.
The planning inspector at the last appeal gave his decision in paragraph 108 of his report. The progress and other public benefits I have identified would originally have come at a cost of significant permanent harm to the character and appearance of the area in which the proposed development is situated, which does not sit well with the intentions of the framework in any event. However, it would now involve a change to the setting of a listed building, which I consider, given its particular quality circumstances, would be intensely damaging.
Right, thank you, Mr. Neal. Would you like to stay unmuted just for the moment, Mr. Neal? I'd like to invite councillors to ask any questions they wish to ask. Councillors?
Unmute.
Have I got anybody? I can't see anyone. Going, gone. Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. Frampton, who is the part of the applicant, to present his piece. Mr. Frampton, you've seen the score, and I'm sure you know it anyway. You get 3 minutes, 30-second warning towards the end. Would you like to start now? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As Neil has stated, the planning system has to undertake a planning balance as to where the overall public interest lies, and the dismissal of the appeal in 2011 for an entirely different scheme does not set a precedent for the determination of this planning application. But in terms of planning balance, I say, 1, this proposal does not involve the loss of any land that has been used for competitive sport. The proposal would result in the loss of 5 trees of moderate quality, yet there is ample opportunity to plant new trees. I accept the proposal would result in the loss of a small area of greenfield land. The development will involve a very modest increase in traffic on Manor Road. And now looking on the positive side, the planning obligations proposed will deliver the approved all-weather pitch, which will significantly enhance playing facilities for the school, as no all-weather pitch is presently available to the school within the town. This provision will avoid a 40-mile round trip to access an out-of-town facility. The proposals will, through, again, the planning obligation under section 106, both in terms of delivery within 2 years, open up these sporting facilities to community clubs. And 6 clubs have fully endorsed the benefits of the provision of sports to all the town. And they include the Stratford Town Colt Football Club, Stratford-upon-Avon Hockey Club, the Stratford-upon-Avon Rugby Club, the Stratford-upon-Avon Tennis Club, Stratford Sports Club, and Stratford-upon-Avon College. And the availability of the all-weather pitch in the town is critical to the viability of Stratford Hockey Club. The proposals will also secure enhancement to the listed building to make it fit for purpose, including the provision of WC facilities for disabled persons. The building is seriously dilapidated and out of date. And in terms of traffic on Manor Road, the provision of on-street parking will avoid the occurrence of parking by coaches and cars as off-street facilities are provided. Evidence has been presented by the school that the only realistic way of providing these enhanced sports facilities is from the capital value of the land for 6 houses. And in respect to the neighbourhood plan, and Neil has referred to CLW3.
30 seconds.
Thank you. The underlying purpose of that policy is to improve the quantum and quality of recreational and amenity space. This proposal will enhance the quality of open spaces there, and it is not identified as local green space as the previous speaker suggested. I would expect a condition to be imposed regarding solar hot water panels and electric charging points for each dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frampton. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Frampton? I'm failing to see anybody. Oh, Councillor Lee. Can you demute Toby?
Classic, always should do that. Just picking up the point about the current 40-mile trip which you have to take to an all-weather pitch. So where is that?
That's going up to Henley and Arden at the present time.
Okay. And that was my question.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Frampton? You're looking quizzical, Councillor Curtis.
Yes, I'm just slightly baffled at the thank you, Chair. 40-mile round trip to Henley and Arden from Stratford.
14, 1-4, he said.
1-4. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Any other questions? No, thank you, Mr. Frampton.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I believe Councillor Rolfe is here, and she will be speaking as ward councillor. Right, Councillor Rolfe, you've got the usual 3 minutes, and Joe will give you a 30-second warning. Do you want to start now?
I'll start now.
Yes, thank you.
Not identified in the neighbourhood development plan or the core strategy. Important green lung south of Stratford. Curtilage of grade 2 listed building cause harm to the setting of the listed building and the public aspect. Boring red brick houses with small gardens. Floor to ceiling glass completely out of character with the rest of the street. Loss of parking spaces on Manor Road. This includes the loss of parking spaces when the entrance to the pavilion is created. There will be around 10 parking space losses. They're for residents. The residents use those. 5 TPO trees removed, causing harm, and those trees are part of the street scene. Loss of light to the neighbouring newly approved house on 34 Manor Road. It's interesting that that house is not showed on the plans. Not sure whether that's deliberate or not. Upper storey windows will look down onto bungalows opposite and look into bedroom windows, which are at the front in some of them. Loss of privacy. Completely out of character with the street scene and will be over dominant in appearance on the street. Will cause harm to the character of Manor Road because of loss of open aspect which is part of its character. Houses out of kilter with building line, goes against green credentials, removal of trees and loss of sports land. It fails to respect the location. The applicant says that it's an enabling development to improve the sporting facilities. However, funding for this can no doubt continue to do so. Alternatively, funds could be raised by selling other properties that the school owns, for example, the pair of houses in Church Street. Yes, this proposed development that will cause great harm to the location would enable the improvement of the sporting facilities, but no.
Right, now you've heard all these. Have you got any, councillors, have you now got any further points of clarification that Neil might be able to help you out with? Councillor Cleave.
It's not a point of clarification. It's just, could I see the front image again, just to refresh? I saw it briefly at the beginning, the hand drawn. Just to have the other one with the tree. I think there was another. Oh no, it was that one. Sorry. Yeah, if you could go back. Yeah, Neil. Sorry, go back to the other one and just. Sorry, the colour one. Yeah, that one. I just wanted to have a quick look. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to get rid of that, Neil? Yeah. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Councillor Rolfe reeled off a whole lot of reasons for objections, but I'm struggling to move from my very first thought, which is, do we want any building on that land at all? And I just think, so I'm trying to get clear in my own mind, just what are the planning objections just to oppose any development of the land? Can Neil clarify that, please?
Neil?
Yes. It's a difficult question because I'm not here to put objections into your mind as such. Let's start with the principle. The principle of the development, in accordance with the sort of settlement hierarchy, if you like, the development boundary, I would suggest you would struggle to maintain an objection on. So in other words, it is in a sustainable location within the development boundary, or built up area boundary, as Stratford call it, of the town. However, if there are site-specific reasons, planning reasons, why the development shouldn't happen, either in the form, well, it has to be in the form that's presented to you. So what you can't do is base your decision on what alternative could come forward. So you have to decide what's before you, and what's before you is 6 houses, not 5, not 4. The removal of at least 5 TPO trees, questionable whether or not it's 6, on this part of the playing field. So the issues that have been raised are all material considerations. So the loss of the playing field / open space, the loss of the TPO trees, the impact on the character and appearance of this section of Manor Road, and indeed the design, very subjective. Is that in keeping or in character with this part of the town? My only caveat there is just be careful, because there are plenty of other examples, rightly or wrongly, within the town where slightly modern, slightly bespoke designs have been allowed, even in conservation areas. So I would suggest, just because it's got glazed gables or significantly more glazing than other properties in the locality, wouldn't necessarily automatically result in an objection, but clearly design is subjective, so it's still a material issue. The loss of parking on the street, I would suggest, is not necessarily an objection that would be sustained, but I say that heavily caveated because the Highway Authority haven't yet responded. This development provides sufficient parking for itself, so will not mean that there is a reliance on on-street parking for the development itself. Whether or not existing residences who currently park there will no longer be able to park there I suppose could be a material planning consideration if it was a significant issue, but I suggest it would need to be a significant issue with with a current problem effectively, and I'm not familiar enough to comment on whether or not that is the case. So the issues you've raised are material issues. Whether they result in this planning balance against the development or in favour of the development is clearly your decision for this evening. I'm sorry if that didn't answer you directly, but that's my role to sort of guide you and advise you in that respect.
Can I just come back, please, Chair?
Yes, I've got a queue of one.
Right. Right. So see, the thing is, Neil, I know the way these things work. If we object on design and all the other reasons, what will happen is that another application will come back to us, and effectively we have agreed almost, because we've objected to might be the design and the layout, but we haven't objected in principle to the build of any properties on that land. And that's in a way, I want to make sure that we can't just object on the land issue before we go on to all the other things, because it'll just come back as another design. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Through you, Chairman. So what Councillor Jackson is effectively saying is, can the Town Council sustain a position where the in principle loss of this playing field is one of objection? And I suppose, yes, of course you can say that, but the decision maker will need to weigh that against the benefits in the classic planning balance. So to say that there will never ever be houses built on this particular part of the playing field is not a sustainable argument. Never say never in planning. You have to look at what's before you. If 6 houses is objectionable, then so be it. And you're absolutely right. It may come back with less houses and therefore more trees retained potentially. And that obviously swings the balance in a slightly different way, perhaps, because there's less harm because less trees are removed, and that sort of thing. So it's very difficult to predict what may or may not happen post this application. And indeed, it's difficult at this stage to understand which direction this application is going in. Often when you see these things, you've got the benefit of other consultee input, but this is a fairly recently submitted application, and you don't have those other comments to assist you, like highways, for example. So yeah, I appreciate the difficulty that this one is giving you.
Councillor Curtis.
Thank you very much, Chair. Neil, I think earlier on you mentioned, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, but that green space could be protected against encroachment. And again, just following from the Mayor's points, this is at least the 4th application by CARES to build on this land. Each of those applications, I think, if I'm correct, has been reduced in scale. But I just wonder, could you, if I've got that correct, elaborate slightly on this idea of protecting against encroachment? Because it may be possible that if permission is given for these, that could perhaps encourage further encroachment on that land. Can you give any clarification there?
Well, I mean, I didn't use the word encroachment, I have to say, but ultimately, I suppose the development is encroaching on undeveloped open space. So that's an important way of describing it, I suppose, or one way of describing it. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's been no permissions given for dwellings on this part of the CARES playing fields or any other part, as far as I'm aware. And the extra care facility that was previously proposed was also rejected and the appeal dismissed. I think you just have to look at this on its own merits at the end of the day. Whether it's one house or 6 houses, there is still going to be encroachment onto the open space, onto the playing field. I should also add that the house next door to the site was not part of the playing field. So the house that's been granted in here was not on the playing field. It was within the garden of 34. So there's been no precedent set. So if I understand the question, you know, if one house is granted, is that the thin edge of the wedge? Does that mean that it sets a precedent for others? Well, you know, there is such a thing as a planning precedent, but equally there's also a very tried and tested phrase of each planning application is considered on its own merits based on the facts of the case and the benefits and the disbenefits. So
thank you, Neil. Thank you very much.
Right, has anybody else got anything to say for questions for Neil? Neil, I've got a question, if I may. Undoubtedly, the row of trees along Manor Road is an outstanding feature of that road. If you recall, Neil, we've had recently a couple of other applications about trees on the Kes playing field in other parts of the playing field. My question is, does it say anything about the health of these trees that are along the road which they want to take down? Are they healthy trees or what?
If you bear with me, I will bring up the arboricultural report, as is pretty standard for something like this. The trees have been surveyed, and they've been surveyed for age, condition, life expectancy, a whole variety of different things. So if you bear with me, I'll run through just briefly what they are. So the first tree that's going to be removed is T6, which is a white beam. It's 7 meters in height, according to this. The life stage is mature. The physiological condition is average. Structural condition is indifferent, and it's classed as a category C tree. I should say that all trees are categorized, if I've got the right phrase there. And I think that it's A through to D. A being the sort of most important, if you like, sort of veteran oak trees that are 500 years old, that sort of stuff. So that's a category C tree. The next tree that's being removed, well, it's 12, 13, 14, and 15. So if I go to those. So 12 is a weeping willow, 13 meters in height. It's mature. And according to this, it's below average in terms of its physiological condition and poor in terms of its structural condition. And again, a category C tree. Then we've got 13, which is a lime, 16 meters in height. It's an early mature, below average physiological condition and a poor structural condition, again, a category C tree. Then we've got a horse chestnut, 13 meters in height, again, early mature, below average physiological condition and an indifferent structural condition. And then finally, we've got a London plane, 17 meters in height, again, early mature, average physiological condition and indifferent structural condition. And in terms of the tree that I think might be affected by the development, it's an apple tree, 6 meters in height, mature, average physiological condition and indifferent structural condition. I'm not an arboriculturalist, so please don't ask me what indifferent means, because I obviously don't know. But you can see there that it's you know, most of them are either poor or indifferent. There's a good condition tree there, a silver birch, not affected by this. But I would guess it was obviously between poor and good, I suspect, is my amateur guess at what indifferent means. So that's the arboricultural report that's submitted with the application that assesses those trees. So there's a couple in there. The weeping willow is poor, and the, where was it? The, bear with me, the white beam. So the There was, oh, the line was poor. So there's two trees out of the 5 in terms of the structural condition are poor. So that's the conclusion. Obviously, the tree officer at the council will scrutinise the plan, scrutinise the arboricultural report. There's nothing before me that would suggest that the ARB report is deficient in any way, but that's for the tree officer to conclude.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Lee. Toby.
Hello, sorry, I keep flicking out in and out of this. I just really want to go back to Core Strategy 25 just to clarify what it says. I think when it got asked before, I was hurriedly writing it down, and what I've done is just gone online to check exactly what it says. So just want to make sure my understanding is correct. So it basically says at the bottom of CS 25, development proposals that would result in the loss of public or private open space, including allotments, without suitable replacement being made, will be resisted unless, and then it gives 2 points which have an and in between. It can be demonstrated that there is an absence of need or it is surplus to requirements. And I think what you said, Neil, beforehand was that one, it's difficult to determine that there is an absence of need and it's surplus to requirement. It's the second point. It wasn't clear to me how it corresponds with this development. So it basically says will be resisted unless it does not make a valuable contribution to the amenity and character of the area. So does that mean it's resisted if the character of the area is damaged by an application?
So through you, Chairman, that's the penultimate paragraph and the 2 criteria at the back end of policy CS 25, so you can see that for yourself. I mean, that's quite telling and means that both need to be met. If it was either of them, it would have been an or. And I put, dare I say it, faith in the scribe that's got that correct, but I've seen government legislation with ands and ors all over the place, and it creates a whole world of pain. But for this purpose, both have to be met. So it's there. Absence of need. I'll be honest with you and say I have not researched this sufficiently, but there will be, as part of the core strategy, an assessment on open space provision within the district, within the town, and whether or not there is a surplus or a deficit. And I can't remember, if I'm being honest, whether there is a surplus or a deficit, and I'm not going to speculate this evening. If you need that, then I can get that, but it won't be this evening. I'll need some time to research that, I'm afraid. In terms of the second criterion, obviously if it doesn't make a valuable contribution to the amenity or character of the area, then that's obviously the issue. Does this part of the playing field make a valuable contribution to the amenity and the character of the area? I would probably say it does, because it's publicly visible, it has TPO trees on it, and whilst it may not be publicly accessible, there is a visual amenity issue there, isn't there, in terms of if you walk, cycle, jog, drive, etc. down Manor Lane, there is an appreciation of the trees and of the open space beyond, quite clearly. I don't think anyone could deny that. And there's a I suppose a gap in the street scene, an open gap, or a natural gap, as in biodiversity, nature conservation, trees, etc. So I think you'd struggle to say that this particular part of the open space didn't make a valuable contribution. But again, I go back to this planning balance, even if it's harmful to the amenity and the character of the area, harmful to the open space because of the loss of a part of the open space. You simply need to decide whether or not that's outweighed by the benefits of the provision of the sports pitches.
Thank you, Neil. Anyone else? Any points of clarification? Right, we'll now come to the debate. I'll go around the table, so to speak. Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid to say that I've listened to all the comments and all the points of clarification. My vote will be a big no, because it's on a playing field. The TPO trees and the policy clearly states that unless it adds to the location, then it should be resisted. So I should be voting against this.
Thank you, Councillor Dowling. Councillor Curtis.
Yes, I find it very difficult to decide on this, to be honest. I can see absolutely that the playing fields could be enhanced for the community, but I think there are probably other ways of finding the resources to be able to do that. It's a really beautiful line of trees. I was just looking at them. They may not be all Class A mature 500-year-old oaks, but once they're gone forever. And so I think on balance, I would vote against.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Mr. Mayor.
I have to be honest and say I can quite easily put myself in the position of Cares and thinking that actually a development that funds a major development of the land is a really good idea. But I'm not here to do that. I can see where they're coming from, but I just think I can't get over. We're looking at on its merits, and I'm going to oppose it for the reasons probably that Councillor Rolfe articulated earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, not really got much more to add to what the other councillors have said. Again, I can understand the drive towards wanting to improve the amenities, but as Councillor Rolfe points out, there's plenty of other ways. We shouldn't be making planning decisions to basically fund other developments. For me, the key thing is core strategy 25, and for me, it just does not comply with that, and we should be resisting that. So I don't like the proposal on that basis, and also for the trees as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fradgley.
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one, I think, because I think on balance there are pros and cons on both sides, but I think it's the loss of the trees and the street scene and the open aspect in this part of town puts my balance against rather than for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleeve.
Yeah, I have to admit I'm agreeing with everyone else. Well, yeah, I can see how it's a brilliant development from the sporting side, and that is needed. But I think there's other ways of, as Councillor Rolfe said, of raising that money. It's a very built up area. It's quite dense already. So to lose that street scene, that green area, and based on the core strategy 25 as well, I would be voting against it.
Thank you. And last but not least, Councillor Taylor.
Well, I think everyone knows how much I love new sporting facilities in Stratford. And I think it would be amazing. However, I would oppose the building of the houses. And I think they just need to look at other means of financing this project. And there are many out there to do it.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to say anything from what you've just heard before we go for a proposal? No? Right. Can I have a proposal, please? I need a proposal from somebody. Councillor Lee.
I propose that we object to the application and the principal reason being it doesn't comply with core strategy 25, and for another number of other reasons, principally the removal of the 6 trees currently under tree preservation orders, the potential damage to the tree in number 34 Manor Road as well, and I think also the listed setting of the current grade 2 listed sports facility as well. I think that's quite a compelling argument for me in terms of this is almost a character-like judgment we're making for the entire area. So that's what I'd propose.
Right. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Cleave? Thank you. Right, councillors, would you like to vote on that? What's the score, Joe?
7 votes yes to the proposal, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Are you happy with that, councillors? Right. Thank you, Mr. Frampton. Thank you, Mr. Carr. And is there anybody else here? And thank you, Councillor Rolfe. Right, we now need to see what Neil is actually formally proposing to send to the District Council. Are you ready, Neil?
Not quite, Chair. I'll share the screen and you can see as I'm doing it. So I've tried to capture what you've said. Right, okay, I'll read out what I've written so far, work in progress. The Town Council has considered carefully the proposal and in particular weighing the harm of the development against the benefits. The harm is represented by the loss of TPO trees, including T17, which will undoubtedly be adversely affected, the adverse impact on the character and appearance of the street scene, which is characterised and dominated in this section of Manor Road by valued and open views of the playing fields. The benefits of securing the delivery of the upgraded sports facilities is insufficient to outweigh the harm caused by this development. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy CS6, which is the Trees and Hedgerows Nature Conservation Policy, and CS25, which is the Playing Fields Policy of the core strategy, and policies BE2, which is the design reflecting local character of the area policy, NE3, which is the trees and hedges, and CLW3, which is the open spaces of the NDP. Now, I've included BE2, which is the sort of not reflecting the character and appearance of the area, but I need to give an explanation as to why you think this proposal does not respond to the local character. Is that simply because of the fact that they're on the open space and the trees are being lost, or is it a design issue? Because in the discussion it was mentioned, obviously the glazing, for example, wasn't reflective of the local vernacular. Is that something you want to raise, bearing in mind my previous warnings about other designs within the town, for example, that have a more modern twist on things? If I could get clarification on that, please.
Could you take it off the screen, Neil? Right. Councillor Lee?
I would suggest that isn't included as an objection.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis?
Sorry, just a point of clarification, Neil, you've written ungraded sports facilities. I think you meant upgraded.
Thank you very much for that. It was a typo indeed, and I should change that now.
Councillor Fradgley?
For me, it is the loss of that open space as you go through that part of the town. That is a significant part of that town. It is quite built up around there. And actually, as you go down past the playing fields, there is that open space and feeling of small piece of countryside that has been retained within an urban area.
Right.
It's nothing to do with the design of the houses. If it was a better place, it's to do with that loss of open space for me.
Yes. Councillor Dowling?
Yeah, I personally don't think that we ought to put anything in about the design at all, because that seems to me that if we put something in about the design, that we agree with the houses, but we don't like the design. I'd rather leave the houses and design completely out of it and focus on the loss of greenfield space and the loss of trees and the amenity, and not the. I think if we start putting things in about the design, then they'll think that we're okay with the principle of houses. We'll just change the design. So I'm personally not happy with that.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, really, because I thought on previous ones we've tended to put every reason why we object, and if we don't object now to design, we wouldn't have the opportunity at a future time. Can you clarify that, Neil?
That's correct. Yeah, you need to cover all the issues now, because it would be remiss of you to not object now to design and then object later to design. That's rather unfair on the applicant. So if the overall consensus is that there is objection to design from the committee, then you need to say that now without a doubt. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Cleeve?
Yeah, based on what Neil said, although I agree what Bill had said, based on what Neil has just said, if we need to, because I did think that the design itself, even if we had gone for planning approval, the design itself did not fit into that area. So I would suggest that is added now if it's important for later.
Councillor Fradgley?
Perhaps I better not say anything because I actually don't agree. I thought the design was fair, was okay. It was a modern riff on that kind of urban language, semi-detached sort of 1930s area. It didn't particularly bother me, the design, but I'll have to go with the consensus of the group.
Yeah. Councillor Dowling?
I forgot to put my hand down as usual.
All right. Right, could we go back to Neil?
You can indeed. Let me share the screen and I will read the revised comments. Right, so Town Council has considered carefully the proposal and in particular weighing the harm of the development against the benefits. The harm is represented by, firstly, the loss of TPO trees, including T17, which will undoubtedly be adversely affected. Secondly, the adverse impact on the amenity, character and appearance of the street scene, which is characterised and dominated in this section of Manor Road by valued and open views of the playing fields, which create a real sense of openness and which will be lost by the proposed development. The benefits of securing the delivery of the upgraded sports facilities is insufficient to outweigh the harm caused by this development. Proposals therefore contrary to policy CS6 and 25 of the core strategy, NE3 and CLW3 of the neighbourhood development plan.
Right, councillors, are you happy with that? Councillor Cleeve?
Yeah, so there's no mention of the actual design itself.
I've not mentioned the design or the design policy. So unless you want that mentioned now as an issue to object, I can add it in, but you'll need a consensus as to whether or not that's point 3.
Yeah, Chair, through you, can we see what everybody thinks on that one?
Yeah, can you flick it off the screen, Neil? Okay. Could I have just a hands up as if you want to include something about design in there?
So, Chair, could I just ask a question? Which is, I fully accept Councillor Fradgley's comments that she didn't particularly object about the design. I don't think we've had a really long discussion about the design, and I think not to say anything at this stage sort of puts us at a disadvantage should it ever come back. I'm not saying that I disagree with the design, but actually, without looking at it in more detail, I'm not quite sure whether I have any specific objections or not on the design. And I'm just trying to keep options open for the future, that's all.
What are you proposing, that we go back into the application? We've got a sticky wicket here because we don't have the speakers here, etc.
But may I suggest, Chair?
Yes, go on then.
That we actually just raise a concern about the design without actually saying negative or positive. That there is a concern about the overbearing nature of the design, and just leave it as a general point.
Yeah.
Do I have a consensus on that? Yeah. Okay, Neil.
Could you just repeat those words, Jenny? Sorry.
Have a concern about the overbearing nature of the design.
When you say overbearing,
the overbearingness is the fact, when I looked at it, it is the repetition of the gables with the glass in the apex of the gable, which is quite different from the much smaller buildings around, and that actually produces a somewhat overbearing, particularly in respect of the open aspect of the area at the moment. It closes it down.
Okay, well, that's not overbearing. Overbearing is a word used to describe the.
Well, just we have a concern about the nature of the design.
That's fine, but you need to be specific about the design. Remember, you can't just say object to the design. You've got to say what is harmful about the design. You can't be generic about it. You've got to be specific.
Councillor Curtis.
Yeah, sorry to Neil. Thank you, Chair. Just to be really clear, and excuse my ignorance, but I'd rather ask a daft question. We commenting on the design, approving or otherwise, doesn't in any way compromise our objections to the site in principle. To me, it just seems that it's almost a sort of compromising our objections to the whole, that well, we are objecting to design or we're not. Can you just really clarify that for me, please?
Yeah, sure. The point you're making is it, if you throw the kitchen sink at it, does that actually discredit the real thrust of the issue, which is trees and open space? Are you coming across reasonable or unreasonable in trying to object to everything? And that does come into it. If you added a comment on design, I don't honestly think that would diminish the concerns you've raised on open space and loss of the trees. I think if you're going to raise design as an issue, you've got to be specific about what is wrong with the current design. Overbearing is not the right word. Overbearing is a word that describes the dominance of a building on another building, or a user of a public right of way or something like that. I think what your concern is, and again, I don't want to put words in your head, but your concern, I think, is about the fact that there is a repetition of a predominance of glazing in a street scene where that's not a local vernacular. And it's very much a sort of tertiary issue. The primary issue is the trees, the secondary issue is the open space, or the other way around. Or maybe they're both primary issues and the secondary issue is design. So there's no harm in just flagging it. But as I say, if it's specifically about the glazed gables or the overuse of glazing, then that's what you need to say. If it's not that particular part of the design, then what particular part of the design is it that you find offensive?
If I could say something here, I mean, are we objecting because of the principle of development on this site, or are we also objecting on the design of it as well? Because if you're objecting on the principle, it doesn't matter what design that comes along, you'll reject it. So I'd like to.
That was really my point, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like you to consider that. Councillor Cleave.
Yeah, I agree with that. My concern would be, because if we, as has happened, that our decision to object is overturned and we haven't said anything on the design, does that then give carte blanche to the developers that we basically said haven't disproved or gone against their design, so they just go ahead and get that planning permission as site seen? That's more of a clarification, Neil. Is that basically what you're saying?
In effect, yes.
Could we say we have a concern about the design due to its reliance on excessive glazing?
Well, what I've just written as a third point, which is there is some concern about the repetitive nature of the design and the predominant use of glazing within the street scene elevations, which are uncharacteristic.
You said what I was thinking in a very much more planning way. Yes.
That's what I'm here for. I've just added, which I'll bring this up again so we can read it out. So we've got.
Yes, could you do that? And could I ask everybody to mute themselves, please? Councillor Fradgley.
Right, there we go. So I have I've slightly tweaked the opening paragraph because I didn't like my grammar. So that now reads: the Town Council has considered carefully the proposal, and in particular the balancing exercise of weighing the harm of the proposed development against the benefits. So that's tweaked slightly, it reads a bit better. And the third point I've added is here: there is some concern about the repetitive nature of the design and the predominant use of glazing within the street scene elevations, which is uncharacteristic of Manor Road.
Right, can I ask, is everybody happy with that? Can you flick it off, Neil? Is everybody happy with that? Can you just raise your hands?
They're all ticked.
Yes, they're all ticked.
Yeah. Okay, right, thank you. Press the button then, Neil.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
May I be dismissed now?
Yes, I think we've finished with you, Neil. See you next week.
Thank you very much. Good night, all.
Good night.
Right, problem. I've just got back in now.
Right. I'm going to go on now to item 9.2 to note the action by the town clerk after consultation with myself and Councillor Dowling on the 17th of June. And please note that in attendance at Chairman's actions was Councillor Dowling and myself at additional Chairman's actions. Item 9.3. Well, 9.3a is no street trading. 9.3b is licensing, and the first one we've got to look at is the barge and quarter deck on the Bancroft Gardens. I presume you all know the boat that we're referring to, and they've applied for planning permission to put some more tables and chairs on the Bancroft. But in addition to that, they want to change the licensing, extending it from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Do I have any comments? Councillor Fradgley?
Yes, may I just say that this has been through planning, the town planning, hasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I, as a ward councillor, I actually approved the planning application, and I have a slight concern about the extension of the licensing, in respect that the first license was given because the public loos are open at that time, and so anybody using the quarter deck actually has a public convenience to go to. If it goes beyond, then I'm not sure if those loos are open and if people finishing their evening drinking would have a convenience to go to. So I would actually say that if this is going to be extended, I think there has to be some arrangement between the person applying for the licence and the district about the opening of those loos and how they will be cleaned, maintained, etc., etc., etc. So my only problem with the extension is to whether it can be properly done within the provision of public conveniences. I think there's a solution to it, but that's not up to us. That's up to the applicant and the licensing committee. But that's my concern.
Sorry, Councillor Fradley, are you saying that permission is provisional on there being a solution to the toilets?
I would support it. The extension I would support on provision that they can find a solution to the public convenience issue.
Okay. Any more hands up? I can't see any. Would you like to make a proposal then, Councillor Fradley?
I would actually, I would only support this extension in the licence if there was a solution to the problem of providing a public convenience for the clients to use when the internet closes.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Cleeve, Councillor Taylor, sorry, Councillor Curtis, thank you. Councillor Cleeve. Right, could you have a vote on that, please? What's the score, Joe?
I'm just waiting for Councillor Dowling to vote. Yes, he's voted now. Unanimous.
Right. Thank you. So that's carried.
Yes.
Okay. Right, the next application is, I have to admit, it's a place I've not heard of. Sale of alcohol at Yarbard, 13 Rother Street. Councillor Jackson seems to know something about this.
I probably have to. Do I have to leave the room because I've got an interest? Because
No.
it is owned by the town trust. So it's the little office at the front, and it's going to be a traditional ales sort of off-licensey sort of place, I think.
Right, Councillor Cleeve.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Jackson. Mr. Bear.
They're not allowed to consume the alcohol in the arts house.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Cleeve?
Yeah, if I'll probably have to leave the room too if it's a trustee thing. But I walked past they're already advertising the sale of alcohol. So I just wondered whether that's actually already started despite not having it yet, because when I walked past the other day I was given out cards saying buy my beer. I was handed a card. So it's just a concern I have that they're already doing that.
With recorded music. Right. Can I have some comments from the rest of you, please? No? Councillor Taylor?
Well, I looked at the details of it earlier today, and it's almost working like an off-license type situation in how they're marketing it. So I don't see any issue as long as people are not drinking it. If people are, it was almost as though they were allowing people to order it online and collect it and then take it away. So as long as we don't have an issue with people drinking it on the streets or in any other location outside, I haven't got a problem.
Or take it into the market.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Councillor Fradley? Demute yourself. No, you're muted.
I agree with what Councillor Taylor's just said. I mean, the only comment I would make, got no problem with it, providing when the licensing conditions are put on, that there are conditions that it's alcohol's not drunk directly from this this place, because you've got some very open spaces there where it would not be suitable for people just to be ad hoc drinking.
Yeah. Councillor Curtis?
It sounds, yes, I mean, I think, thank you, Matt, Mr. Chair, sorry. We do need to be careful, and, you know, on-street drinking and other substances is a problem, as we know, in town at the moment. But I would have thought that the type of premises this is aimed at a slightly more upmarket. I don't think there's a specific risk associated with this, if I can say it like that.
Okay. Councillor Lee, have you got anything to say?
He says it right as well. So this is pretty close to the one stop where people could buy alcohol anyway. Yeah, it sounds to me as if there shouldn't be an issue with this.
Yeah. Councillor Dowling? No, nothing to say. Okay, are we happy to agree to this then?
Yeah, just send it through.
Okay, Councillor Curtis? Okay, all right. We agree to that then. Right, item 9.4, notice of decision. We've got a few on there which the district council have been refusing, and a couple of ones that they've withdrawn, but you know, nothing too bad. Item 9.5, any other business? None. Item 10, Chairman's verbal report. All I will say there is, which I've already said anyway in other areas, that it might be useful for some people to attend an SDC planning meeting as an observer, because at some point one or more of you might be representing the town council at that meeting, or if you are district councillors, you might be there representing your residents. They're a lot more formal than we are. The only trouble is the meeting I went to, they had to they had to switch it off and start again because they couldn't get one of the speakers in, and it took about half an hour to sort it out. I hope they've sorted out for the next one, but it is worth going along as an observer. And it's quite easy to do. You just go onto the SDC website and you call up the meetings, and then that particular meeting, and if you call up the first page, the invitation to the meeting, etc., there's a link on there, and all you do is press the link and it'll take you straight in as an observer. Okay. Item 11, no request for alteration. One thing that Elisa has missed off the list as well is that, which I've asked her to put on for the future, is registration to speak at SDC planning. Planning B is actually on the 1st of July, supposedly. I forget what it was now, but we went no reps anyway, so we don't have to make any representation. But you might like to go along and observe it. It's on the 1st of July, supposedly. Right. Item 12, to appoint substitutes for the next Chairman's Actions, which is on the 1st of July. Can I have a volunteer, Councillor Taylor? For a substitute, thank you. Mr. Mayor?
So I was going to say, all of the other committees are considering the revised terms of reference from Councillor Howe, and I know that the planning isn't particularly affected because it tends to be pretty much the same terms of reference. But are we planning to have a discussion sometime just to confirm that we're happy with what's being proposed?
I was under the impression that the the clerks of the meetings had to put that item on the agenda of the whether it's the next meeting or what, I don't know. That was my understanding. I could say we don't provoke it. We leave it to the in this instance to Lisa to put it on the agenda.
Right.
And I'm sure Sarah won't let her get away with not putting it on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fine.
Okay. So the next meeting is scheduled for the 7th of July at 6 o'clock, and I will now close the meeting, and it's 8:05. Okay.